Welcome back to the Tara Palmeri Show. Today's episode is a powerful one. My guest is NewsNation anchor Leland Vittert, who opens up about something most people never knew about him. He was diagnosed with severe autism as a child. In his new book, Born Lucky, Leland tells the raw and heart-wrenching story of what it took for him and his family to overcome the bullying, the heartbreak, and the endless obstacles that come with this diagnosis. This isn't a story about celebrity or television success. It's a story about survival, about what it takes to beat the odds when the world tells you that you won't make it. But Born Lucky isn't just personal. It lands right in the middle of today's political firestorm around autism, with public officials reviving questionable claims about what causes it. Leland has a surprising take on all of it, one that is bound to challenge assumptions on both sides. This conversation is raw, deeply human, and at times gut-wrenching. It's a reminder that behind every headline about autism, there are real people and real families fighting to be understood. So stay tuned. This is one you don't want to miss. Leland, thanks so much for joining the show. It's cool to have you on my show. Thanks to you. You have me on your show from time to time on NewsNation, which everyone should check out. Leland is a great anchor on a very, I think, balanced news network, which is really cool to see. He's got a new book out, Born Lucky, which you should all run out and grab it. I just started reading the first few pages. I got to say, I had tears in my eyes as I started reading it. It debuted at number 4 on the New York Times bestseller list. I think is a testament to this beautiful story about autism, which, you know, it's amazing to me that you have overcome autism and you ended up in the communications field. It's like you turned your, I don't know if you want to call it your weakness or your adversity into a superpower. I don't like the word weakness because I think we're all born with things that put us at slight disadvantages in life, but you are certainly a resilient person. And I'm so in awe of what you've been able to do in your life. So thank you for coming on the show. And I just have to say, I love that you call it Born Lucky, because so many parents, when they hear a diagnosis that they don't like, they feel like, oh, how could this happen to me? And you and your family have completely turned it on its head.
Well, a lot there, Tara. Thank you. And thanks for having me on. I think there is something to separate here. You know, the success of the book is not because of me. I am a television anchor, but I'm not narcissistic enough to think it's because of me. It's because of what the book speaks to, which is hope and power and agency for every parent of a kid who's having a hard time, not just autism, but kids on the Asperger, kids on the autism spectrum, kids with ADHD, anxiety, difficulties growing up, the bullying that now exists on social media. Born Lucky is proof of what really involved parents can do and how no matter what the diagnosis is, number one, your kid doesn't have to be defined by it. But number two, how much parents can do to help their kid be more and to push their kid to be more and to show them that self-esteem is earned, not given. All of the things that my dad did with me, and it's resonating with parents because nobody is giving them that message right now.
Yeah. And I think it's like the sense of agency too, that things that you can do something about it, that you're not a victim to your diagnosis. Like I feel like we've fallen into victim, I guess almost like it's like a personality trait now people have, and people want it on both sides of the aisle politically. Like you even hear the president being like, I'm a victim of political persecution. I'm a victim. Like you hear it from everyone. It's like they want to be identifying as a victim. But in this story, what so many people could say is a story of victimhood. You turned it into a story of triumph. I love this line. When your family found out about your diagnosis, the person who diagnosed you said, the second thing is that he has to want to do it. He has to want to be better. He has to want to be part of society. Lucky is what they called you, which is so sweet, has to want it. And for years, that was your dad's guiding light. And from that moment, he was geared toward, quote, wanting to be better. And it's just a reminder that so much of life is just making your own path, right?
Right. Yeah, no, it's a great point, Tara. And, victimhood, and I got in a little bit of trouble for saying this earlier, but I will say it again because I believe it to be true. Victimhood is a more dangerous and addictive drug than fentanyl because it
Yes.
will crush you and it will define you for your whole life. So I think that is the overarching theme of the book. The scene you're talking about was after my parents had been told I needed to be evaluated, which is the worst thing any family can ever hear about their kid, right? So they take me in one of those little medical testing centers and give me off to the psychologist. And the psychologist comes back with me and says, we don't really understand what's going on inside his head. Now, to be fair, my wife would say that probably is still true. But
Yeah.
she said there's a lot of problems here. Number one, terrible behavioral problems. So if a kid would touch me in the lunch line, I would turn around and slug them. I couldn't play with any kids my own age because I didn't understand how social interaction worked. If kids were playing, I wanted to talk about things that were serious. If kids were trying to be serious, I would try to tell a joke. It was completely foreign to me. Number two, really bad sensory issues, right? So, if I had socks on or a shirt on I didn't like or a jacket or whatever, I would totally melt down. And number three, I had what we would call now severe learning disabilities. So in that test, they gave me an IQ test, and an IQ test is two halves. IQ score is the average of the two halves. A 20-point spread between the two halves is a learning disability. I had a 70-point spread.
Wow.
So from mentally retarded in the parlance of the day to genius in other parts. And the woman said, we'd never seen that spread that big before. So when she said to my parents, this is what you're dealing with, they said, is there anything we can do? And she said, generally not. And then as you picked up on, she said, there are things, but he has to want it. And what was different about what my parents did is they said, we're not going to tell anybody about his diagnosis. And we're not going to give him any accommodations. So no extra time on tests, no telling teachers that I had all of these problems and therefore needed special protection from bullies or even from the teachers themselves. Nothing. And my dad believed that the only chance I would have is to adapt me to the world rather than adapt the world to me. And Born Lucky is that story of how he adapted me to the world.
I love it. I love your dad's dedication too. I mean, so much of life is the luck of being born into great parents. And it seems like your father, who wrote the book with you, Don Yeager, is one of those people.
Well, Don's not my father.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is your dad's name Don as well?
No, my dad's name's Mark.
Okay, excuse me. Sorry. I thought that was your dad.
No, so the Don story is a great story. I was never going to tell this story.
Okay.
And this had always been private. My parents never told anybody about my diagnosis. They didn't tell me until I was in my 20s.
Wow.
And when I was in and when I got to be about 38, 39, and I started at NewsNation, I was working with a talent coach to help me in making the transition from being a reporter to a full-time anchor and a primetime anchor. And one of the things she kept talking to me about was the emotional connection with guests and how to respond and match their emotion. And for the first time in my life, I ever told anybody that I worked with, or really anybody outside of my family, I get it and I'm working on that, but you have to understand that's about the hardest thing in the world for me to do because I'm autistic. And I didn't want to use it as an excuse, but I thought it was only fair that somebody was trying to coach me knew that she was working with somebody who was severely deficient and it would be harder for her to teach that. And she didn't believe me. She said, I can't believe this. This is stunning. And I've never, have you told anybody? I said, I've never told anybody. This is why. She said, well, have you ever written anything about it? And I said, well, yeah. I said, about a year or two ago, I wrote about 700 words, basically sort of a thank you to my dad, just a thought about my dad. But I hadn't even shown it to him. She said, let me see it. So I sent it to her, and she, unbeknownst to me, sent it to a book agent who knew Don Yeager, who's a 12-time, now 13-time New York Times bestselling author. And the
Ah.
book agent knew that Don is the father of an autistic child. And Don got the 700 words, and he called me and he said, I really have to tell this story. And I think it's so important. And what he said
Oh.
is that this story is going to give hope to so many families. And, what this story would have meant to me if I had known it when my child was diagnosed. So that's where
I love
Born
that.
Lucky came from.
I love that. I've also worked with coaches like that by the way, when I went into television from being a print journalist. And it can be really hard to hear from people for the first time that these are all the ways that you don't sound great, or these are all the ways that you have been your entire life that need to change, right? Now
Well, I've
I
heard it
don't,
my entire life from my dad. So it's,
so you are used to coaching like that.
yeah, that was really what he was, right? I wasn't going to have any friends. And I wasn't going to
Yeah.
be good at
Mm.
school, and I wasn't going to be good at athletics. He knew all those things. So he turned into a full-time coach to teach me the social and emotional fabric that most people understand naturally, that still for me to this day, is a learned skill.
Mm. Yeah, it's amazing. And I still can't get over the fact that you work in communications, because I actually have some people in my family who have almost the exact same diagnosis to what you had. My mom's sister could not speak until she was 5 or 6. Her son had the same, and they're brilliant in math and sciences. She's a nurse practitioner. Her son's an engineer. They don't have the best communication skills, but they're obviously extremely, proficient, beyond proficient, almost genius level in other skill sets. Like for me, I could read very young, I could speak young, but math and sciences, not my place. I could memorize things, I could read, but I was not able to compute. I have problems with simple math sometimes, which the listeners who pay attention to this show will see from time to time when I'm counting on my fingers. But the fact that you leaned into the area that was hard for you, I find that to be amazing. Like that is a strength and a character, something that I admire. And on the show, especially when we talk about injustice, I use the word survivor rather than victim. And to me, you are a survivor of something that so many people right now are just trying to wrap their head around. Like autism,
Yeah.
autism is a dirty word. It really is. And I remember your parents saying that they didn't like the label. They didn't like the category. And I'm sure that's why they didn't tell you to your 20s,
Yeah.
because just that the term upsets people. And I think there's so much disinformation out there. And what do you think about that, especially as it's being debated in the
Yeah.
political sphere?
It's a great question. And look, for me, growing up was hell, right? By the time I was in 6th grade, I'd been pulled out of, I think, 3 schools.
Oh God.
When I was in 5th grade, my dad came over to check on me at this one school I was at, and goes up to the PE fields, where he figured out that I was going to be, and says to the PE teacher, how's Lucky doing? And the PE teacher looks at him. The guy was a big guy, football player, knew my dad from another school. And the guy goes, well, I think Lucky's doing a little better today. And my dad goes, great, let's go see him. Let's go see him in PE. And the guy goes, I don't think this is a good idea. My dad goes, why not? He says, well, he said, for the past month or so, I've had to put him with the girls because the boys
Oh.
bully him too badly.
Oh.
My sister, as we were interviewing family members for the book, I asked my sister about her memories of me growing up. And she said, well, my first memory of you as my brother is from that 5th grade, when you would come pick me up at kindergarten. So my sister was in kindergarten, I was in 5th grade at the same school, and we would walk home together. So I would walk down the stairs from the classroom, my classroom to her classroom, pick her up, and then we would walk actually through those same PE fields that my dad's soul was crushed at, out to the woods, through the woods to our house. It was about a half mile. And she said, I remember every day we would get to the woods so no one could see you, and you would just break down crying. So that 7th grade, and this is in Born Lucky, my parents get called in now that I'm at my 4th school, 2nd week of school, the principal sits them down in one of those little principal's offices. My parents are so hopeful that this now will be my fresh start. And they say, this woman says to my parents, everybody at this school thinks Lucky is really weird. So arrow number 1 through my parents' heart. And then she follows up with
Everyone. What a
everyone.
terrible
And she
thing to
goes,
say.
follows through with, and I do too. And you'll
Wow.
understand this, Tara, what my dad didn't tell me through all of that was that middle school was by far the best training you could ever get for a Washington newsroom.
Oh God, yeah.
But
yeah. That's why I started my own company. I didn't really like middle school or high school that much, so
that makes you a good person. As I said, I never liked anyone who liked high school because the values of high school are so screwed up. But you brought up where we are, and I'm not trying to dodge your question about where we are in the national conversation. I think
we will talk to that, but I am interested. Keep going.
I'll answer your question. Number one, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a scientist. I have the chemistry grades to prove it. So therefore, I don't know about Tylenol dosing or cause and effect and anything else.
Right.
Number two, the explosion of autism cases should be the scientific question of our time. 1 in 1,500 when I was a kid, now 1 in 31, triple that for boys, higher in poor and minority communities. We've got to find the answer to this. And finally now someone, and be it led by RFK, is doing that. And Chris Hayes on MSNBC did this thing. He says, RFK Jr. is obsessed with finding the cause of autism. How dare he? Well, how dare we not? I mean, if we can prevent kids from going through the hell that I went through, and by the way, the kids who have profound autism, whose lives will be shattered for the rest of their life, who will need 24-hour care for the rest of their life, whose parents' lives were upended, and will forever be dedicated to trying to just get their kid to survive. Why wouldn't we want to find the answer to that? And I think at the same time, you can acknowledge that everybody is a beautiful person and everybody has qualities and strengths and should be loved and protected and on. And say at the same time, if my wife right now were pregnant and you gave me a piece of paper so that I could check a box, my child will be autistic or not, I would choose no. 1,000 out of 1,000 times. And so would every other parent. So this idea that we can't be honest about what autism is and you have to celebrate everybody and say, oh no, everybody's fantastic, I think is really insulting to the difficult road that so many people have gone through.
Okay, I want to counter that for 1 second. First of all, you're right. The number of diagnoses of autism have gone up drastically. It is now a fastest growing minority. But is it possible that doctors have gotten better at diagnosing autism?
Yeah, absolutely. That's absolutely true. And
that more people
the diagnosis is, the criteria has certainly expanded. I have yet to find a highly respected epidemiologist who will tell you that explains everything. And I sat down with Jay Bhattacharya, who's head of the NIH, and I said, okay, explain to me 1 in 1,500 to 1 in 31. He says part of it's surveillance, which is what they call what you're saying.
Yeah.
And he said, and there has to be other factors because of how they look at the data of the number of profound autism cases, when people are diagnosed, why certain states have higher numbers than others. I don't understand the data, but every smart scientist I know says, and I've spent a lot of time researching this, that there is something going on. Now, maybe it's just that men are, and we know that the older a man is, the more likely they are to have an autistic child.
Yeah.
My dad was 35 when he had me. I'm 43, so take from that what you will, and don't have any children. But maybe that's the answer. I don't know.
I don't know though, because my grandmother had 3 children that didn't. I'm not going to diagnose my aunt, but she sounds like she had the same issue that you had, and then her son had it. It's like
there's a genetic component. There's all these things, but I think what's so important, Tara, and this is where I'm really passionate about this as somebody who went through this, is we don't know. Right. But what is so frustrating to me is all the people who want to say, well, it can't be vaccines. We must acknowledge that it can't be vaccines because there's misinformation everywhere. Mm-hmm. Well, that isn't to me the most important thing. To me, the most important thing is finding the actual answer. And if you start putting, sacred cows out there that you can't talk about and you must acknowledge the sacred cow before you ask the scientific question, that's not science. And for everybody who says we want to follow the science, let's follow the science. Science is the pursuit of truth. Right. And if it's not vaccines, then there should be no problem asking that question and doing good science about it.
Absolutely. I think everything should be on the table, but I do worry about disinformation and people using the information that's being put out there, and making life choices based on what exists on a Reddit thread, or even what is being promoted by people who don't have any background in the topic. Because I have friends that have
I worry
children.
more about the other side.
You
I'm old enough to remember when you couldn't say that you could get COVID if you had the COVID vaccine. I'm old enough to remember when disinformation turned out to be real and
right?
true. So therefore, I'm more worried about not finding the truth than I am about the consequences of disinformation being out there. Now,
Even if that means people don't give their kids vaccines, and
well,
then they
that's for parents to decide. I'm not
okay.
like, I don't, to me as a journalist, I don't view myself as the information police. I view myself
Mhm.
as a really strong questioner. And
Yeah.
I think if you go back and watch my interviews with Bhattacharya and others, you'll see I think the bigger risk right now is not finding the answer. That to me
Mhm.
is what should be the essential point. Is we're at a moment where finally people are willing to talk about this as the scientific question of our time. And that to me is the most important thing.
Yeah. You wrote, because doctors confidently tell you what doesn't cause autism, but lack confidence in describing the causes. So parents feel like they're left in the dark because the medical community can't give them reasons for what causes it, is basically what you
Yeah.
you
Yeah. I
feel.
mean, look, I think there's a point here, right? From Chris Hayes. When he said, basically, RFK is obsessed with finding the cause of autism, as if, how dare he, that this is so wrong. I think there's a lot of people who are far more interested in scoring political points than they are in trying to figure this out. Like, okay, so if it's 1 in 2 kids who are diagnosed with autism, because that's where we're going with the statistics, how this is expanding, then do we step back and say, okay, now we're going to find the answers? To me, kids should come first. Let's find the answers and go from there.
Yeah. But it doesn't, but like the idea that Tylenol causes autism, like that doesn't concern you, that's been promoted
Look,
by the highest office. By the way, this isn't just a doctor.
Tara, I think we can
Yeah.
all agree, okay,
Mhm.
that I'm not a doctor, you're
No,
not a doctor, and
no.
Donald Trump isn't a doctor.
Neither is
So,
RFK Jr.
well, that's fine.
Yeah.
Nor was Biden's HHS secretary, nor was
Right.
anybody. That to me is irrelevant.
Right.
What's relevant, and if you want to take your medical advice from Donald Trump as a mother and not take Tylenol and choose Trump over your doctor, that's up to you. Now, is that where I get my medical advice? No, but that's why that's why I've had Jay Bhattacharya on the show, not
Yeah.
other people, to talk about this from actually looking at the science. And what I've heard from them is, we don't know the answer to this question. Let's figure it out. I think we can all agree that shaming mothers or issuing blanket statements about what mothers should and shouldn't do on very nuanced medical issues from the podium or from the White House, that probably isn't helpful. I mean, I think the
You think
message.
there's a stigmatization. There's a stigmatization around actually investigating autism, is what you think.
Yeah, I don't think I know.
Yeah.
My reporting shows that, because I've talked to scientists who have said over and over that one of the reasons we don't have an answer is because, for example, the pro-vax community, or the vaccine community, has refused to even fund or allow studies that would show whether or not vaccines do this. I mean, that's not me saying it. That's what my reporting shows. So, to me, there's a confluence here, right, between the book of my story and the current climate. I'm not an expert in autism. I'm not an expert in the causes of autism. I'm not a scientist. I'm a journalist. And what my reporting shows is that we don't have the answers to this really pressing question. And it's become a political football where people are more interested in scoring political points than they are in coming together in solving this problem, which is what I wrote in the Wall Street Journal.
I will say, I love that your dad really took control of this. He, was able to sort of sell his business and focus on teaching you how to exist in an environment that some could argue you weren't really, born into understanding on your own. And he seems like such an amazing person. And even like the way, like he would tap his watch as a signal to you rather than scolding you. He seems like he could be he should write his own book, frankly, on how to.
Well, he should.
Yeah.
He's very reluctant with the hero moniker that I give him as our most true heroes. The afterword is written by him, which I think is the most important part. And when we went through, Tara, trying to write this, he was very reluctant. And he said, look, I haven't talked about this for 43 years. I don't think we should now. And I said, okay. And we got to the point that we were going to do this, and because we thought it could really help a lot of people. And I think it is, because you're seeing what's the response to it, right? That it's sort of blown up here. And what I said to Dad is, I said, look, you need to tell me and be as raw with me as you can in your interviews. So he and I did long interviews together, and he was as raw and as open as he could be or could remember. A lot of tears. And in return, I said, but I'm going to give you the manuscript before I turn it into HarperCollins. And if you don't want me to turn it in, I won't. Now, to be fair, I didn't have a plan because I had a book contract, but if he said no, what was I going to do?
Your finger crossed, Dad.
Yeah.
Please approve.
So, well, I gave it to him, and he read it, and he said, I don't know. This is really deeply, deeply personal stuff. The Born Lucky is the worst parts of my life. And I'd never been to therapy. So going to therapy on national television, Tara, as much as I like talking to you, is not really like, my top 10 things to do in life. It's hard. But I gave him the manuscript. He read it. He said, I don't know. And we're sitting there, and I said, all right, Dad, let me turn it around. If when we were in that little medical office building and the woman said there wasn't much hope for me, if instead she had handed you Born Lucky and said, this isn't a prescription, it's not a cure, but this is just a story of what a parent can do who gets really involved and really, really dedicates themselves to helping their kid be more rather than just meeting their kid where they're at, what would you have done? And he said, I would have read it every week. So that to me is the most important part of this. And yeah, he was in a position to quit his job. I asked him, if you hadn't been able to quit your job, what would you have done? And he said, I would have worked the night shift because I knew the only chance you had was for me to be there for you when you went to school and when you came home for school, because I was your only friend, which is true.
It's beautiful. Also, again, Leland, flipping the script, even in the way that you convinced your father to tell this deeply personal story to the world. Because I know from my own generation, my parents' generation, they're not like us. They were not the type that, go to therapy, share their fears.
I'm not either. I didn't go to therapy my whole life. And this is the therapy. And I've often joked with Don as we were working on this together. I was like, buddy, this is, I've never talked about this stuff with anybody but my father. This is a whole different thing. And now going to therapy on national television and telling these stories over and over again. I do it because it can help people. You brought up the watch story, and this was the way my dad tried to teach me social interaction, right? So we would go to lunch normally with his friends because I didn't have any friends. And I was a curious little kid. I was an incessant questioner. I would have loved to gone to lunch with Tara because she just started her own business and her own show and is doing so fantastic. And I would have sat there and you would have been talking about your new apartment or whatever. And I would have said, Miss Palmeri, because it was always Mr. or Mrs. to my dad. How do you pick the guests for your show? How do you book your guests? How do you find your best sources? How do you get them to trust you? How do you sell advertising? What's it like being out on your own and starting your own business? And it would have never ended. So my dad would tap his watch. And that was my message to, number one, stop talking, but number two, to bookmark it, right? So then we would be in the car driving home, and he'd go, okay, so when Miss Palmeri was talking about her new apartment, why did you ask her about what guest she was booking? Yeah. I don't know, Dad. I thought it was interesting. Well, right. But what do you think she wanted to talk about? How could you have connected with her? And then we would role play me asking you questions about you and what you were talking about. And this was an everyday for 10 years of teaching me that social fabric.
That's amazing. And by the way, I think your dad actually made you a great journalist.
Well, thank you.
Seriously.
I'll let others decide that, but thank you.
Yeah, no, that's amazing to hear this story and your father's dedication. It is a really hopeful story. I mean, I don't have children. I don't know what they're going to be like. They all come out differently. My brother and I are completely different people, born 10 years apart, had our own struggles, our own personalities. Yeah. And my parents had to deal with both of us differently. He needed more hands-on support at certain times in his life, and I needed more hands-on support at certain times in my life. And but the fact that your father really stepped up to the plate is just a sign that, like, you have agency, and so many things in life are out of our control, but you can turn the chaos, you can turn, the disappointment into something really beautiful. And I think this is a story, and your success is a testament to that. So, we're all rooting for you, and as you've already shown, and I think it's so important. And so many people have stories like this, and they're afraid to say them. There's so many other.
I think that's what's so interesting about this, Tara, is that as the book has come out, and we know the book's only been out now for 2 weeks, but the hundreds of people I'm hearing from who now feel like they're not alone. So many parents are struggling, right? And they feel like they're alone, and they're basically told by the experts, just put your kid in bubble wrap, right? Meet every kid where they're at, adapt the world to the kid. And there was this woman who came up to me who I'd known tangentially for a while. I'll give you 2 brief stories on that because I think you're so right. She has 2 kids, both of whom are model beautiful, one boy, one girl, Ivy League, D1, Ivy League athletes, incredibly successful. Like, these kids, you'd think, what issue has they ever had? And this mother came up to me and she said, your book spoke so much to me. And we were sitting at a dinner, and I didn't want to laugh, but I'd be like, really? Like, I know your kids, and I know my story, and they're not the same.
Yeah.
And she says, my son had a nut allergy. And when he was diagnosed with the nut allergy, I was told that I needed to go to the school and pull every peanut out of every classroom and demand that there be a peanut-free zone around my son to protect him. And she said, I knew that there'd be no way to create a peanut-free zone for the rest of his life. So I went doctor to doctor until I finally found someone who would desensitize him to peanuts. And that, I was told I was being a bad mom, and I was told I wasn't, protecting my son, and on and on. And now, because he's desensitized to peanuts, he can be in ROTC and go be in the military, which he never could have done if I hadn't done that. And it was, no one's telling parents how much power they have, right? And the flip side of that is, I've gotten this criticism, oh, well, this is the story of how to turn your kid into a cable anchor. No. This is a story about how to show kids they can be more. For my dad, it started with, I was doing 200 push-ups a day as a 5 or 6-year-old because it was the only way he could figure out how to teach me self-esteem. So I was talking to this father of a kid who has profound autism, nonverbal, will always live in a group home. His father's incredibly dedicated to him. And he said, I just loved what your dad has done. He said, my son was 20, very unhappy, obviously, struggling, trapped in this body as a 20-year-old nonverbal kid. And we found out that when he left the group home to go to activities, the thing he liked the most was splashing around in the pool. So I decided as his father, we're going to teach him to swim, which everyone told him he couldn't do.
Yeah.
And the kid now swims 1.5 miles every morning.
I love it.
He's happier. He's engaged. He gets up every morning and puts on his clothes to go to the gym. It's totally changed his life, all because his dad said to the experts, we're going to do more than have my kid splash around in the pool. So that to me is why this is resonating.
It's, and sometimes in life, you have to be told you can't do something to feel self-esteem. Do you know what I'm saying?
Right. Well, I think you have to be told, I'll put a different point on. You have to actually accomplish something, right? Because so much now, and I think you believe that we're going to be in agreement on this, the world wants to tell everybody they're wonderful and you're fantastic. And self-esteem is a participation trophy. Be proud of this participation trophy.
I definitely wasn't raised like that. My parents were no parents. I was like, I'll prove you wrong.
Self-esteem is earned. It's not given.
Yeah. It's true. I mean, but still, we need stories because we're not always able to see through the dark. And clearly, this story is a story of seeing through the dark. Your dad felt intuitively that he could do something. He got little nuggets of, encouragement of maybe this could happen, maybe this could help. And he took it upon himself and he intuitively helped you build your self-esteem. There was no guidebook. Now, I hope your father, if he's listening, will one day write the guidebook. I know it won't be the same for every child.
I think, I think
different.
He did. He really did. If you read the afterword.
Okay.
The guidebook to me, and everyone's asked me for advice. What advice would you have for parents? I have no advice because I'm not a parent. This is a parenting book written by a kid.
Right.
But if you read the afterword by my father, and Tara, you'll appreciate this. I had George Will write the foreword.
I read it. I loved it.
And I had my dad.
George Will, and I'm like,
yeah.
What?
I had my dad write the afterword.
Right.
And I had to fill 240 pages in the middle, which was
piece
the challenge.
Of cake. Come on.
Yeah. But Dad's afterword really is, I think, his philosophy, and it's not. It's about a mindset that he had, and I don't have any advice for people. I think that everybody will read the book and take different lessons from it. But that was the idea, that this was show, don't tell. This is my story. It's not a prescription. It's not a how-to manual. It's a story of what a really involved parent can do. And, it's funny.
It's a story of hope, overcoming adversity. It's a story. It really is. It's a story of hope.
Well, and parents need that. They're not told that.
No. They feel powerless. They hear doctors and diagnoses and this and that. They're always told what their child can't do, not what they can do. They feel so much guilt. They blame themselves. It's a society that's constantly out there telling you that you're the one that's the problem. This is what people need right now. I think you've really tapped into the zeitgeist of the moment in so many ways.
Well, all I know is that we thought that by telling this story and by doing this, it could help people. That Born Lucky could be a way for parents to understand how much power they really do have and how much hope there really is. No matter what their kid is dealing with. So that to me was really the important part of the story.
Well, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for writing this book and for being so bold and honest and raw. And believe me, a lot of people walk around day to day with secret diagnoses, and they have labels and they've been told by doctors that they can't do this or do that. And it really harms their self-esteem. And it really takes identification to people who are out there openly sharing their stories that give them hope. And it's your courage that really, that helps others. I mean, that's a really big part of the reason why I focus on the Epstein story too, and focus on the stories of the survivors, showing them not as women who are beaten down, but as people with agency, and they're not victims or survivors, and they're taking their own, they're getting their own justice. And I think in a lot of ways, we have to see ourselves as people with power and agency in our own life stories. And this is a story of that.
Well, it's a perfect also story of you going out on your own in journalism and what you've built and created. It's the same as what I think you pointed out, what the Epstein victims are doing now, and talking about their story. I never thought of myself as a survivor or a victim or anything else. I've always just sort of thought of myself as me.
Yeah.
And, I don't ever want to compare, I think there's, in the same way there's like, the diversity ladder, there's like the oppression ladder of everyone, well, I've suffered this way and I've suffered that, and,
Yeah,
oh, well,
for sure. Trauma for one person is different than a trauma for another,
Right. So I think it's just sort of, to me, this was about that really intimate relationship of parents and kids, and just what my dad did for me, and therefore what other parents can do for their kids. And I just think it, as you pointed out, though, that concept of victimhood, and of letting kids sort of be the victim, doesn't sound like it's how your parents treated you. Certainly not how my parents treated me.
I would say you are a survivor of autism in some ways.
Well, I'll let everybody else put the labels.
Yeah, whatever you want to say, whatever makes you feel.
People have said a lot of things about me growing up, and still do, I guess, on Twitter, on the Twitters as it's called. But I'm just me.
Yeah. Well, we're really happy you're here, and thank you so much for joining the show. Would love to have you back. And I hope every parent that's watching this looks to Leland and his amazing career and follows him on NewsNation, goes out and buy the book that's already number 4 on the New York Times bestseller list. Like I said, I wish I had time to read more of it, but as we know, this show comes out almost every single day, but I've been on it, and it's a tearjerker from even the forward. So yeah, it's a great book. It really brings you in, and it's a great life lesson too.
Thanks, Tara.
Thanks so much. That was another episode of the Tara Palmeri Show. Thank you again for tuning in. Please rate, subscribe, share this with your friend, leave some comments about what you liked or didn't like about this show. If you want to support my independent journalism and get my exclusive scoops straight to your inbox, please go to tarapalmeri.com and sign up for the Red Letter, my newsletter. That's Tara, TaraPalmeri.com. And it's a way for you to support my independent journalism and get exclusive news straight from me to your inbox. I want to thank my producer, Eric Abinate, my researcher, Abby Baker, and Adam Stewart on the graphics. I'll be back again soon.